and we are today at East Aquhorthies, and I have the circle to myself, so I thought I'd better quickly get on for a live stream. It's a beautiful June late afternoon. It's probably about 22 degrees, which is a good 6 degrees warmer than it really should be. Far too warm. And it's what we would call close in Scotland, which is a kind of like a phrase to say it's a wee bit muggy. But can't complain really, although I'm complaining. So a wee walk through East Aquhorthies. It's an interesting circle, and the Great Grounds of Stone and other documentation talk about this being pretty much found as it is. Not much in the way of reconstruction or stones having to be re-erected as far as documentation is concerned. But a little bit of history around about why we've got this big dished environment for the circle. This is a big kind of a wall here called a roundel, or a support wall, and it dips down into a shallow mound here for the cairn, and then back up like a big rim. I may have to have a wee speculation round about some of these support stones that are holding up the recumbent from falling over as well. But it's pretty much been kind of, as far as maps and stuff are concerned and documentation, there's an early map of 1780 odds, which shows the circle. Doesn't show the recumbent, but it shows the 12 dots, which I guess represent the 12 stones that still stand. There's a slightly later map which shows 10 stones with an unfortunate ink blot across on the far side, which could be a fallen stone, or it could just be an ink blot on the map. So it's an interesting that there's a little bit of disparity between these two maps. But when coal started to come around and doing the surveys around about 1900, it was pretty much as you kind of found it. There wasn't really any kind of need to have done any kind of reconstructions or re-erections of stones or such. In fact, the complaint was that the centre section, centre court, was overgrown with, you can see the kind of yellow spiky bushes type stuff that was pretty much overgrown here. And to be able to do the surveys was a bit of a challenge apparently. So what have we got? We've got all 12 stones standing. We've got a nice big recumbent, almost 4 metres. We've got a healthy big flankers. There's only some graffiti which I've been able to kind of point out here. It's a wee bit difficult to see. It's the Ordnance Survey mark, which is essentially, although it's a mark, and this stone's not going to move, so you can pretty much take a datum of it. You can see the datum hole here for the marker. It's pretty much still vandalism, isn't it? So, and apparently there's a couple of cup marks on this number 1 east flanker, which I can't quite see. But we'll have a wee walk round, just have a bit of perspective round about these stones and a bit of an idea of what kind of sizes they are. There's been quite a lot of discussion recently around about kind of alignments and stuff. There's obviously up the north, just fairly close by, and a lot of kind of hills round about this area. It's got a fairly good view of the local landscape, and I'm open to the idea about alignments. However, what's really unique about this circle is if you just stand with your back to the recumbent, you know, like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, stone 8's just right across from you. It's a fairly symmetrical stone circle. In other words, there's one stone right across from the recumbent, and then they're kind of paired off all the way around the circle at fairly equal distances all the way around. So a wee bit of history around about kind of the circle then. This roundel, this wall that I'm walking up, didn't exist originally, obviously. The wall for the field boundary, this field boundary, and this one, this is this here, and that would have come in a straight line, pretty almost directly close to this number 4 stone, right across over in this direction here. So the field boundary originally back in that 1780 map was adjacent to the circle. And like most stone dikes, you can imagine that the stone, for making that stone dike, probably came from this cairn. Although this roundel is reportedly most of the cairn stones, I would imagine the first use of them was to make that dike, or parts of that dike anyway, and that's why it would have been so heavily robbed. What happened then, in the kind of what seems to have happened just before the map was created for 1847, maybe 20 years before that, was this track. You can just see this track that everybody comes up to the circle, and then there's a track that comes round sort of either side of this fence, then goes round and goes up. So the wall that originally existed was broken into, and probably used for this roundel, as well as any cairn stones that were left. And the problem I have with the roundel is it's a bit like Tire Bagger. It was built a little bit too high, which then creates this kind of like false dish. You can see the lip going round all the way around. It kind of creates this kind of false dish. Now that wouldn't have been the original. The original would have been as flat as the rest of the surrounding area. So this roundel's kind of like created a little bit of a kind of false environment for the circle. It potentially has the opposite effect of, I think I was along at Aquhorthies, which is near the coast, near the east coast, and also Elsie the Greater, where the outside circle, for example, this kind of outside circle stones, where the outside of the circle area was eroded so badly that you could see the base of the stone. And this is almost the opposite way round. The outside of the circle is built up really high. You know, there's a good half a metre difference between the inside and the outside. And I think that's maybe starting to give a little bit, or had originally maybe given a little bit of a kind of lean to the stones leaning in, and certainly has done something, well, potentially has done something with this recumbent. There's a bit of a lean, a definite lean. The face is leaning in towards the circle. You can see the back side is top heavy compared to the lower section, and you know, God knows when these support stones were put in place, but it might have been at the time of the roundel construction, when it looked like the stones for the roundel, which are quite deep. The roundel wall isn't just a wall; it comes in a good 1.5 meters into the circle, and you can see there's a difference here. There's a weight being put against that face of that stone, that recumbent. So maybe at the time of the roundel being created, maybe they decided that they needed to put in a little bit of support into the recumbent. Maybe it started to move, maybe it fell, and they've erected it back up. It's a difficult thing to kind of get any kind of proper documentation or evidence round about that, but these support stones are actually supporting it. This one here is definitely hard up against it. So it's a bit of an unusual circle in that respect, and this roundel is built a little bit too high for the stone's protection, for the circle's protection, clearly, but maybe a wee bit too exuberant. Maybe just wanted to use all the stones that they were given. So let's do the usual. Let's start off with stone number 1, the west flanker then. So it's a good couple, and again I'll do the kind of measurements from outside the circle. It's a good couple of meters high, got a flat surface on the outside, flattish on the inside, although it's a bit higgledy-piggledy, and a definite kind of corner here, corner there. So debate whether it's been shaped or found, but it's definitely a block of a stone, and it's square and it's tall, and it's got a bit of a squarish top on it. Again, difficult to tell whether there's no real reports round about the documentation to say this area was forested or planted with trees. and that might explain the lack of real kind of damage on these stones. But yeah, it's a block of a stone, this one. Reports of all the stones being different materials. I'm not entirely sure about that. I think there's one or two that are maybe red jasper kind of granite type, but I think they're mostly grey beige. So number 2 stone, the recumbent, a good 4 metres long. It's a big recumbent, not quite anything like old Keeg or anything like that, but it's a big recumbent. Nice flat face, facing, yeah, the general orientation is south southwest, and a reasonably flat top, a wee bit higgledy-piggledy, bit of flat top. But the interesting part is it's not that wide. If we come back into the sort of central section again, it's not the widest recumbent, more of a slab, and it's a bit odd with this top heavy section chamfered at the back. If it wasn't for these support stones, this would have clearly fell. So it's definitely needing them. And a little bit kind of raggedy at this end. It's not really a finish off here. So it could have been a result of some damage, or found like that rather than quarried. Number 3 stone then, east flanker, a bit pointed, flat surface on the outside, a wee bit triangular maybe, unless it's been damaged. Sort of rounded side and back coming in. If it wasn't for that flat face in front, you might be forgiven for this being slightly turned inwards. Normally the length of the stone, or the block of the stone, would be in along the circle circumference with the recumbent in the circle stones. But it's a bit of a block of a stone, and again, it might have suffered from this roundel being built. There is a little bit of a mention in Great Crowns of Stone where the circle line of the stones come round, and if you were to follow that circumference line, the recumbent settings set a little bit back actually from where it maybe kind of should be. And again, this roundel might have been the cause. Or it's fallen back and been re-erected at some point, and just nobody really kind of recorded that. Could have been also as a bit of a kind of result. Height wise, it's just about 2 metres. It's a little bit smaller than the west recumbent. So we'll walk round the roundel. There has been evidence that if you look at the Great Crowns of Stone documentation, there's a little bit of still evidence of the cairn kissed in the middle. And again, there's a whole debate about, what came first. Was it the cairn or was it the circle? Again, I'm open to that, which way round it was. Interestingly though, there's lots and lots of cairns without a circle round about them. All recumbent stone circles, as far as I know, have always had a cairn built in them. So that would kind of suggest to me that the circle came first. It was used for whatever it's been used for, celebrations or worship or whatever. And then, as a sign of respect, somebody fairly important has had their cairn built within it. That kind of would maybe kind of be a bit more of a sensible narrative to me than anything else. But and there is some evidence I know about cairn kists having carbon dating artefacts that are older than the ones found under the stones. But again, it would be quite common for a cairn kist to be relocated. So for example, if the cairn was over here somewhere and it was somebody fairly important, then it would be quite possible to have their remains relocated or reinterred in the circle, and therefore that would be an explanation of why they're older. So yeah, you've got to kind of like maybe be a bit open-minded about which one came first. Also, that I think we have to keep an open mind about, if it wasn't for radiocarbon, we would never date these circles anywhere as old as they are. these circles would have been lumped in with Pictish time frame without a doubt, you know, because the closeness of stone circles to Pictish stones. We'd have just lumped them in to say it was all the same people. So if it wasn't for carbon dating, we would never have thought these stone circles were as old as they are. So yeah, I've just to kind of keep a bit of a kind of, well, I do anyway, open mind about what these circles are all about. I think the more I look at them, to be completely honest, the more I've been round all 71, well, I've actually been around 73 and revisited a lot of them. The less convinced I am of any answers. I'm more full of questions, to be honest, about what these stone circles were all about. So back onto the task in hand. So stone number 4. It's about chest height when I'm on the outside of the circle, but on the inside, just to give an idea of scale, it's up above my head. And it's a lovely red granite. It's beautiful, and it's a block of well, maybe a bit of a slab actually. It's a bit triangular at this end. Come round to the recumbent side, it's maybe a little bit thicker, so certainly a bit of a block of a stone for sure. And it has a little bit of a lean, and that might have to do with this roundel that was built. So that's stone 4. Stone 5, lovely flat face. Oh, look at that, that's kind of red. This might be, I'm not a geologist, so I'm only guessing, but it mentions jasper. I think this must be it. It's lovely, almost marble. Beautiful. Flat faced. A little bit higglety-pigglety on this, so you maybe be forgiven to be a bit of damage on this side. A little bit triangular in shape. It's about head height, so 1.6 maybe meters tall. Lovely, lovely stone. So that was, I keep losing count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 is a little bit kind of maybe paler red granite. A block, you can see the side, squarish block of a stone. On the outside of the circle, it's about up to my shoulder height, and the inside it's well above my head height. So it's a block and a half, this one. And again, what I was saying about alignment, fine. You know that the hill in the distance there, you definitely have some alignments made up that from the recumbent. Stone 4 and 12 seem to be equal distance. Same with 5 and 11, all the way through to number 8 standing on its own at the end, at the back, and being graded as well to be the smallest. So I think, on the simplest possible terms of alignment, perhaps the stones were just there to be marked out of a circle as a space of celebration, and the alignment was as simple as the recumbents facing sort of south. You know, that's probably at the simplest level of alignment. That's maybe about as low as you can maybe get. I'm open to people drawing up other alignments, but the evidence would suggest that these recumbent stone circles are kind of graded. They've got circle stones, there's a recumbent and it's facing south. You know, that's pretty much the kind of characteristics behind them. So what are we on? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Stone 7, we're getting a little bit smaller. And what I was talking about grading, you know, stone 8's a little bit still taller than this one. Kind of pale red granite, nice slab of stone. Relatively square. So whether it has been found like that, or whether it's been quarried and shaped like that and brought here, it's been interesting. But you could, and in that case, this top section could have been had a bit of a damage done to it, whether it's been reduced, maybe blast holes drilled into it. It's tried to be reduced maybe, but there's again no documentation of that to suggest that. Stone 8, back to being a kind of bit of a block. Flat front in the inside, flat-ish on the outside. Again, kind of evidence of sides and it being relatively square. A kind of unusual top to it. yeah, and it's what's it, on the outside of the circle it's about up to chest height, and inside the circle it's a well above head height, so maybe 1.7 kind of height. Number 9, it's an interesting stone because it's so thin, definitely a slab, nice flat surface, grey granite. It looks like a nice side to it, and flat outside, and really nice flat top. It's just this outer edge is a little bit, it's a bit thin. Looks like a kind of knife almost. It's so flat, slab-like. Number 10, and these circle stones are pretty much equally spaced, which is really interesting. Flat outside, flattish inside. There's a bit of a kind of theme, isn't there? So if this circle hasn't really been touched that much, and it is pretty much as we find it, and it's not had a huge amount of damage, there's a lot of similar type block stones here, where other stones that we find have maybe kind of feel that they've been maybe shaped, have maybe been a bit damaged. So yeah, this has got a bit of a kind of taper, thick bottom, and nice thick front to it from this angle, from inside the circle. Grey granite again, and a flat front from the outside. So that's number 10. Number 11, a bit of a square block, well, it's a bit of a thick slab is probably what you could maybe call this one. It's quite thick from the side. It's got this step on it which could have been damaged, could have been shaped. Relatively flat front from inside the circle, and again you can see the kind of grain of the stone from this side. From inside the circle it's about 1.7, it's just above head height, but you can see where the roundels kind of encroaching. I think that's probably right on the stone. It's only up to kind of belly height on me here. And then coming round to stone 12, got a stone here which is, no, we're not entirely sure, although the roundel does get a bit thin here compared to what it has been around here, so it could be, this could be a bit of an outcrop of what the roundel was coming into. But stone 12 is a massive stone. It's difficult to maybe get an idea about sheer size of this thing, because again, flat face on the inside, but it's not quite facing the inside, it's a little bit angled towards the recumbent. A bit of an edge there, it's almost as wide as it is thick. Same on this side. And again on the inside, if I'm standing next to it, it's almost a good couple of metres high, but on the roundel it only comes up to about my belly, and there's a wee bit of a damage here on it. These stones are actually quite warm. It shows you Aberdeen in the summer just gets too hot. And then coming round back to the recumbent. So let's have a wee look at these support stones, because I think it's worth a wee look. Hard to kind of tell maybe where these came from, because they're big enough to be circle stones in their own right almost. Were they part of the kist? They're like pretty big, and if they've not been shaped, they've been found pretty square. This one is almost touching recumbent. Clearly was put here to be touching the recumbent because of that top heaviness, I guess. And this one on this side is literally touching it where my finger is. So probably not a huge amount of support, but definitely here to stop it from falling over. So inside the centre of the circle, there's a bit of a slab here, and there's some evidence, as you can see through the grass, of the cairn. It'd have been interesting. I think there's a slight slope, regardless of the roundel wall. there is a slight slope going from sort of stone 12 down to the lower side of the circle, according to Great Crowns of Stone. You can see it on the cutaway elevation. But there's a little bit, but that might be just off put by this roundel that was put in, and the lack of the cairn. You just don't know about what kind of size it was. So yeah, it's a lovely, well, accessibility is brilliant because it's just off the A96 just at Inverurie. It's got its own car park, it's managed, so it's, you know, kept well. It's got a gate and some signage about the history. It's fenced off, and it's got lovely walks just behind me up the woods. So yeah, it's a lovely circle. It's definitely very accessible. It's definitely worth a visit. It's a bit of a kind of crown in the kind of group, I guess, and it does get a lot of visitors. So if you were to come here, you'd probably expect to be sharing the site with a lot of people. Although I seem to have caught it early, and there's a group of people just coming up. So yeah, it's a lovely site, definitely worth it. I hope you've enjoyed that wee walk round, a bit of a closer look at all the stones, and maybe kind of some questions round about alignments and stuff like that, and what came first, the cairn or the stones. I think there's some debate that would be quite helpful in the group. But yeah, thanks very much for joining me. Cheers.